Hello and welcome to a special New Mexico Now television forum focusing on the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. I'm Anthony Moreno. In April, President Donald Trump signed an executive order calling for a review of national monuments that were established back to the start of 1996 and are over 100,000 acres. Now, this review includes the 496,000-acre Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument here in southern New Mexico. That review has prompted support and protest from residents. Today, we discuss the monument, the review, and try to gain a better understanding of what the monument means to folks here in southern New Mexico. Joining us on our panel today is Carrie Hamblen, CEO of the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, and Ben Gabriel, Executive Director of the Friends of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. Thank you both for being here. Now, we will be speaking with them in just a moment. We want to let you know that KRWG also has invited representatives from the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association, the Western Heritage Alliance, and Doña Ana County's County Commissioner Benjamin Rawson to take part in this forum. They have declined our invitation to be here and to take part in this forum. We do know that the review has protesters, and we will be hearing different opinions of this, but this review also has supporters. The review has drawn praise from New Mexico 2nd District Republican Congressman Steve Pierce, who is quoted as saying in a recent column this month, quote, "The monument equates to a total of 600,000 acres of land because it not only includes the 500,000 acre footprint, which is all federal land, but it landlocks roughly 100,000 acres of state and private lands within it. This is the congressman continuing, I've spoken with ranchers who live and work in parts of the monument who find it very difficult to stay in business while complying with regulations that accompany the designation," end quote. Now, speaking of ranchers, the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association did send us their position on the issue as well. Karen Cowan, executive director of the organization, said in an email response to us, quote, "The New Mexico Cattle Growers Association supports the minimization or elimination of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. The original designation was far too sweeping and doesn't lay out what specifically is to be protected. While grazing is mentioned, at this point, there is no guarantee that grazing and other uses will be maintained over time because there is no management plan in place. Ranching families have no security in what their future may hold. This also puts the pressure on lending institutions, which holds the mortgages of these ranches. Additionally, the executive director says, quote, "There is some 80,000 acres of private and state trust lands contained within the designation utilization of these lands in question." The New Mexico Cattle Growers Association has not taken any position on the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument because no members have come forward requesting support, as those in the Doña Ana County area have. However, it is worth noting that the Federal Bureau of Land Management and the New Mexico State Land Office are engaged in negotiations on land exchange of state trust grazing lands within the boundaries of that monument for BLM lands elsewhere in the state, so that the State Lands Office has grazing secure outside the monument, end quote. Now, obviously, some lengthy quotes here. Now, we have supporters of the National Monument in its entirety joining us. I'd like to ask you both, just starting off, what are your thoughts when you hear, the people who are in favor of the review? I want to start with you, Ben. I want to hear how you disagree with where they're coming from.
Yeah, we understand where they're coming from, but unfortunately, within this National Monument Proclamation, the monument was designated on May 21st of 2014. Inside the proclamation outlines all the objects to be protected, and it includes the uses that are outlined, and so that proclamation includes grazing and other traditional uses that our community values and feels important. That includes recreation, utilizing trails, things like that. In addition, we also have a Congressional Research Service just recently announced that there have not been impacts to the 35 or so leases that are inside our national monument. So the ranching operations, while we value them, this is multi-purpose land. As an organization, we feel that all these kind of assets can exist in one place. they operate under a management plan currently, and while that last one was done in 1993, there will be a new management plan, but this is part of how the Bureau of Land Management supervises these lands and ensures that we use them in this multi-purpose fashion.
Carrie, I saw you shaking your head, disagreeing with what Congressman Steve Pierce had wrote in a column in the Las Cruces Sun News earlier this month. Tell us why you disagree. I saw you shaking your head around when the congressman mentioned that it was, quote, really 600,000 acres.
Well, this is the thing that concerns me the most about the congressman's position on the review and also the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks Monument as it stands right now, is that this community, which is the largest community in his district, supports this overwhelmingly. About 63%, according to a recent poll that was conducted by the Las Cruces Green Chamber, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, about 63% of them support the monument as is. That's up 5% from last year. So we're talking about just 1 year, and we've already seen a 5% increase in support, community support. We also look at the City of Las Cruces, the Doña Ana County Commission, the Town of Mesilla, the Town of Anthony have all issued resolutions supporting the monument as is. So my concern is that the congressman is not listening to the community in which this monument resides and listening to the community as a whole that it supports the national monument as it stands. So as a public official who has been elected, I'm concerned that he's not listening to the people in the district in which he represents.
Now, you mentioned there's been resolutions passed, but what about putting this issue on the ballot when it was ongoing? There is some criticism that why shouldn't this have been taken up and put it on a ballot in one of the general elections?
Well, because that's what the Antiquities Act is for. It was designated in 1906. It was the Antiquities Act was created in 1906 by Teddy Roosevelt as a means of protecting our cultural landscapes, our protected environments that should be protected and preserved for generations to come. And so it's not something that should go up for a vote. That's something that is authorized to the president under the Antiquities Act. And there have been a number of presidents who have used the Antiquities Act on both sides of the aisle since it was designated to protect these public lands. So to have it go before a vote, I don't think is really the appropriate way to go when there's a monument or a national park designated. I mean, people didn't vote on Yosemite. It was declared as a national park or a monument. So that's not really the appropriate route to go with this. But that's why we appreciate the Antiquities Act, and it's not dependent on whatever side of the aisle you are politically. That is the authorization that is given to the President of the United States, who is sitting at the time. It's also open to the current president as well.
Now, speaking of the current president, I mean, he's brought up, when he signed. He brought up when he signed the executive order reviewing the national monuments that, this is, quote, an egregious use of power. He talked about it being a federal land grab. And, this review going back to 1996, if we look at 1996, and especially as we move on from 2000 on, the size of the national monuments are quite larger than they have been in the past with certain designations. We're talking of, over 100,000 acres to over 1 million acres of land that has been established. Does it get to the point where maybe we need to reconsider some of these public lands as being perhaps too large?
Well, I think actually Ben can do a better job answering that because of a recent study that talked about all the archaeological sites that are available in the Desert Peaks. And that's the argument that the Desert Peaks shouldn't be part of the monument.
I mean, we're talking, Ben, about close to 500,000 acres of things. I mean, is the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument? What are some of the things that you considered, when pushing forward this, that it was going to be too large?
Yeah. First off, the Antiquities Act protects objects, cultural resources and values, and so it identifies the smallest footprint. So in Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, this is the smallest footprint that protects all of those resources. So historical, cultural, those pictographs and petroglyphs. Recently in the study we released on Thursday, over 160 have been identified. And those are those cultural sites. In addition, we know that there's geological formations like Kilbourne Hole, Aden Crater. There's been scientific research that has not been able to be conducted in this national monument that will eventually unveil thousands of other potential sites for these archaeological resources as well. And so that's what the Antiquities Act covers, is those resources. So this is the smallest footprint to protect all of those objects.
What are some of your concerns if the monument should be reduced in size and some of these places will not be protected?
Yeah, essentially there's a tremendous amount of scientific research that can be done. Some of these places have not been surveyed through the archaeologist's eyes and their lens, so we need to understand what history is here in the Southwest. We have Spanish history all the way from 13,000 years ago up to modern day that tells a story about who we are as a community. And it's really important that we understand that and we protect that as part of who we are as Southern New Mexicans.
I want to move on to talking about one of the things that the Cattle Growers Association brought up, and that was the management plan. Of it not being in place. Is this something that usually takes a long time to really figure out? Have you have any contact with ranchers and trying to figure this out and brought into the same room with the BLM?
So a resource management plan is a process that the Bureau of Land Management, they have a system in which they go through. It's been 3 years since that process has began. They are now in the initial stages of that. Because of this review, it has actually pushed that resource management plan back. So this review has kind of impeded that process. But eventually, the management plan will bring all voices, ranchers, recreation users, just community members, and counties, states, all interested parties to the table to make sure that they develop a plan that meets all the different needs. So this is part of the process that Bureau of Land Management implements. They're currently going through one for a tri-county plan that impacts all of the lands in the eastern part of the state. The members plan, which was last done in 1993, is up to be renewed regardless. So this is just part of the process of how the Bureau of Land Management manages their lands. This national monument, all the lands that we're talking about were existing federal lands. And those state inholdings and private inholdings, they remain state inholdings and they remain private inholdings.
One of the things that also I was curious about is U.S. Senators Tom Udall and Martin Heinrich have spoke out against the review. I recently talked to Senator Heinrich, who said this could possibly impede negotiations between the state land commissioner and the state land commission and the federal government on how they're going to do land swaps. And New Mexico could possibly, he said, New Mexico could possibly be losing out on money during this because he mentioned he rarely agrees with Land Commissioner Aubrey Dunn, who recently said that this review is impeding the negotiation with the Rio Grande del Norte. Is that something that also should be in consideration when we're talking about the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument?
Well, I think eventually, but currently, those land swaps are really focused on small tracts within the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. So that's really the focus of that. But those state lands are important for our education system, and so by swapping them out, it actually allows for the state to find lands that would benefit our state economically in a better way, and while preserving all of the federal interests as well. So that is a deal that I think, again, Aubrey Dunn and our Senator Heinrich, they can both agree on because it's beneficial to both our state and our federal government as well.
Now, I've spoke to many supporters like yourselves of the National Monument staying the size it is, and actually folks who worked, they said, decades in getting the monument established. I'd like to hear from both of you about why you got involved and why you thought it was important for your organizations to stay involved.
Sure. With the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, our organization has been in existence since 2010. So we came in kind of at the tail end of this at least 10-year grassroots effort by 11 native tribes, conservationists, environmentalists, outdoor recreation individuals. Just this incredible group of people and organizations to really get the monument designated. And because of when the Green Chamber was formed, we came in, and the discussion started around 2012 for our involvement. And part of that was to really look at the economics, because that wasn't explored yet in that whole 10-year+ process. And so as the only chamber in town that talks about the importance of preserving our public lands and how our local businesses can benefit, we commissioned an economic impact study in 2013 that was done by a nonpartisan group called BBC Research out of Colorado. And they found that with a monument, potentially we could get $7.4 million annually in revenue, that 88 jobs, it's not necessarily a big job creator just because of I think, the focus of where it is in our county, but 88 jobs created and $560,000 in state and local taxes annually. And so at that time, that seemed to be what the White House was looking at to kind of tip that argument. And so, I mean, in addition to already just this incredible foundation that was already developed by a number of groups as part of this coalition of groups for the 10 years. And so in 2013 with this economic impact study, that's when we found out that, in the beginning of 2014 that we were really on track for having a national monument designated. Since the designation of the monument, one of the things that we were really pushing to try and have to do is have our local businesses become stewards. And I use the term thoughtful stewards of our national monument because I believe that there are opportunities to where people can benefit financially and local businesses can thrive as a result of protected public lands, but you've got to protect it in order to make money off of it. So I use the term thoughtful stewardship a great deal when I'm talking to local businesses about their role in the National Monument. And so we developed a marketing toolkit that would help businesses talk about the National Monument, give them ideas on how to create social media campaigns and get their employees out into the monument. Matter of fact, the co-op, Mountain View Market, had somebody who went out into the monument every month and wrote a blog on it. And to encourage those businesses to cross-brand the monument and what they do. And one of the things that when the monument was designated, we're all very familiar with what happens up at Dripping Springs and La Cueva and all the different sites there. But as we've been talking about, there are a number of trails out in the Sierra de las Uvas and the Potrillos and Kilburn Hole and Naden Crater where some people don't know where to go. And so when the monument was designated, it was kind of like, yeah, so where do we go? So what we did was we created a brochure that allowed people to go ahead and find those different trails. And this was in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management because we didn't want to send people to sites that weren't necessarily developed yet, or especially these sites that we talk about that have thousands of petroglyphs and pictographs out there because they had already been found and some have already been graffitied over.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to work with the BLM. But the thing about this brochure is that businesses can put their logo here on the back. So they become stewards of the monument. So if somebody comes in to SunPower by Positive Energy and is like, hey, so you've got this monument here, they can give them this brochure and say, here, compliments of SunPower. And there are about 50 businesses that have this marketing toolkit.
And I want to continue on with the economic impact with you, but I also want to hear from Ben. With progress, with comes some struggle. The Friends of the Oregon Mountains, Desert Peaks. What have some of the challenges been now that the monument has been established in ensuring that you can reach all of these goals and hitting what you want?
Yeah, so for us, the Friends of Oregon Mountains, Desert Peaks, we have a mission to protect, restore, and educate. And really what that means is being a liaison between the community and our national monument. So we've worked to develop a tremendous amount of programs that meet those needs. So there are challenges we've had to where we're really focused on artist in residence program, really getting out there and maintaining our trails, doing restoration projects on habitat and things like that. We've had to pivot a little bit more into an advocacy role, making sure that we're educating our community about what is factual information about our national monument, who can use it, and really making sure that we're educating the community about the benefits of our national monument.
How often do people come up to you and ask you just questions about it because they've never been there?
Well, I think this community has embraced our national monument. They embrace public lands tremendously. These are places that people go to relax. They go after work, to go mountain bike. They go for all types of activities, running and hiking and walking. We have ranching. We have all these other historical artifacts. So I think a tremendous amount of our community has visited these areas, and we're seeing more and more people take place. Just last year, we saw over 102% increase to locations within the National Monument that record them. And so there's many places that we're not able to record that data, and we're seeing increases there as well. So we see that on the trails, and it really is building a vibrant community.
Speaking of increasing attendance, I just have about a minute before we move on to the next topic, but how has the road of being paved to Dripping Springs played a role in increasing attendance.
I think it's really important that we actually have that access to Dripping Springs because it allowed school buses and young children. Another part of our organization's goals is to make sure that youth are getting outside and having access to public lands. So we provide transportation grants for Title I schools to get out there, and so that road has allowed school buses and people that would hesitate to drive on a gravel road to access our national monument.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the next topic. Here in Las Cruces, supporters of the monument have stated that the monument has had a positive economic impact on the community. We were able to speak with some local business owners who say that the monument has helped them find creative ways to grow their businesses. It's a weekday morning at Beck's Coffee in the historic Mesquite district of Las Cruces. People are catching up with one another and working on their laptops as co-owner Tyrell Thacker tells us about his shop's Organ Mountains Desert Peaks blend.
It's a nice medium to dark blend, very rich and robust, real nice chocolatey finish. It's got some great artwork for the label from Wayne Suggs, a wonderful photo of the Organ Mountains.
Thacker owns Beck's with his wife Ariana Parsons. They came up with the idea to support efforts to get the local monument designated.
We came out with the Organ Mountain Desert Peaks blend right before the monument was officially recognized as a national monument. It was on the final push to kind of get it pushed through, and it was just something to show our support for it.
The monument has not only inspired a new coffee blend, but also local fashion. Chris Lang is selling shirts and hats at the farmers market in downtown Las Cruces. He and his wife Carrie own and operate Organ Mountain Outfitters, a clothing company. Lang says that he saw opportunity for the outfitting company once the monument was designated.
I think the inspiration probably did come right after the designation of, Organ Mountains as, a national monument. And, we saw an opportunity to really build a community and build a culture and build pride among Las Cruces here.
Lang says that he wants the brand to also promote outdoor living and give back to the community by making a donation to the Las Cruces Public Schools after each shirt is sold.
And so we just thought, what better way to align ourselves with those who are on the reduced lunch program at the Las Cruces Public Schools. And so what we do is we take $2 of every shirt sold and we give that to the Las Cruces Public Schools for the children on the reduced lunch program.
Business has been good for Organ Mountain Outfitters. Lang says they plan to open a storefront soon in downtown Las Cruces that he says he hopes can house not only clothing but also provide an outlet for local artists and musicians. His company has recently decided to support the protection of the monument with a new shirt that displays a hiker and the phrase "Stand with our land." Lang says proceeds from the t-shirt sales will go to support efforts to keep the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument as it is. It's an effort that Ben Gabriel, executive director of Friends of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, says helps reach a different demographic that his organization may not usually interact with.
So 2 New Mexico monuments are part of that. And so Organ Mountain Outfitters really stepped up to the plate to connect with their base, which is younger people that we typically as an organization haven't been able to reach out to. Gabriel
says that the monument is changing the local economy by offering businesses better branding and other opportunities.
The real estate agents, we're hearing lots of positive stories about marketing. 15 minutes from Organ Mountains Desert Peaks. We have doctors moving here because they see a quality of life that wasn't here before.
Quality of life is what David Kreider, co-owner of Southwest Expedition, says has helped his recreational business thrive. The company offers tours that help people explore parts of the monument.
It's grown. We've seen our business increase just because of that. We've been doing more tours and requests for tours. We have an online presence, Facebook presence, and we're getting very positive responses because of that.
Those positive responses have enabled these 3 local businesses to thrive, thanks to what they say has been made possible with the designation of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. We continue the discussion on the economic impact of the monument. Headwaters Economics released a series of research of studies focusing on monuments in the 11 U.S. western states. The economic group examined communities located near national monuments that were 100,000 acres or more that were established back to 1982. In Doña Ana County, From 2001 to 2015, the group says the population grew by 21%. Jobs have grown by 27%. Also during that time, service jobs saw a 41% increase and non-service jobs have seen an 11% increase. Non-labor income grew the fastest at 71%. Headwaters Economics also says that traditional jobs are holding steady. The group says that long before the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks creation, commodity industries such as agriculture, mining, and timber in Doña Ana County were small to the overall economy, with agriculture at 3%, mining at 0.01%, and timber at 0.3%. Now, Ben, I spoke to you while I was producing that package. You've seen the economic impact, I noticed with the shirts that were going with Chris Lang and the Organ Mountain Outfitters. Is that a good example of what we've seen from, possible entrepreneurial opportunities for folks in the community?
Yeah, I mean, we have small entrepreneurial people like Chris who are taking the national monument and making the best of it. But this is also large scale. We have companies that are looking at places with national monuments, public lands to move their businesses to. And so it's really about creating a quality of life. Having protected public lands is a benefit to communities, and jobs, or companies that have jobs, are moving to places that have these, like places like Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument.
Carrie, how much do you hear from members of your organization about how important the monument is to them in growing their businesses?
Well, members of the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce understand that we talk about the principle of the triple bottom line, and that is people, planet, and profit. So you treat your people well, both your customers and your employees. You operate in a manner that is good for the environment and will bring your profit. None of those are above the other. They're all equal. One of the things that we talk about with the Las Cruces Green Chamber, in addition to supporting local businesses, is creating sustainable communities and protecting our air, land, and water. We're very clear about that because we believe that all of those work together to create quality of life issues. And it makes me so happy to see Ariana and Ty, David Kreider, and Chris Lang, because especially, those businesses, locally owned businesses, give back to local charities 350% more than do national chains. And if you're running a nonprofit or you're asking for a donation because of your kid's soccer team, you're usually going to a locally owned business because you're speaking to the owner, or you're speaking to the manager, or you're speaking to the husband of the owner or the wife of the owner. And those are people who are employing our friends and our neighbors and our family members. So there is this community connection. So when I see businesses take on that role of being a steward of the National Monument, it makes me very, very proud of this community and showing that we really are invested in making this Las Cruces. We already know Las Cruces is a great place to live. We want to make sure that it stays that way and that it continues to thrive. So, when we talk about, the Headwaters studies, there are two of them. There's also a study by the Center for Western Priorities called the Golden Rush Report. And what that found is that retirees, and it listed Las Cruces as one of those businesses in one of those communities, and the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. And what it found was that retirees are moving to western states with protected public lands 3-1. And so what they're doing is they are bringing retirement and investment income into our community. They want to be healthy, so we've got this great 50-plus program with the city of Las Cruces, where one of their employees, who happens to be a friend of mine, her job is to take seniors and retirees hiking out into the monument. What a great job to have. But retirees are wanting to be healthy, and so they're moving to states like Las Cruces. And I know, we've got reports and lists that show Las Cruces is a great place to retire. That's not new news. But what we're doing is we're really bringing in those different things, and we've got this wonderful gem of a monument. Why not capitalize on it? And why not have our local businesses become stewards of it? And they're just three examples. Organ Mountain Outfitters, Beck's Coffee, and Southwest Expeditions are just three examples of businesses who have capitalized on the monument. Azul Lounge at the Hilton has the OMDP cocktail, which has the colors of the mountain at sunset. Let Them Eat Cake has the OMDP cupcake, which is a combination of green chili and pecan. And if you've had it, you know it's good. And there's also, let me see what else. Oh, there's the Peak Panini from Milagro Coffee Espresso. And there's also a local winery. I don't think we can say it yet, can we?
I don't think we can.
No. So
you don't want to break news here?
We can't break it yet. But I can tell you that there's going to be some local wines that are going to bring in all these wonderful things about business and our national monuments and wines, which New Mexico is known for, all together. And we're going to have, I think, a release party in September.
think so.
Right, yes.
With local
So,
artists.
I mean, you're talking about some possible, even more economic
Absolutely.
opportunities. One of the things that Chris Lang brought up when I was speaking with him was that he also saw this opportunity for not only an entrepreneurial effort, but also to instill some community pride. What are your thoughts on the opportunities, with this monument, how it can impact pride in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we talk about our national monuments here locally, it's our national monument. So you hear that throughout our community. You're seeing groups of mountain bikers form. They're going out on Tuesday night rides. So you're seeing that. Groups of women mountain bikers have their own kind of group. We have Jornada hikers who are going out. So meetup groups, it's our communities coming together to support this national monument. And we actually are creating a corridor of national monuments. We have White Sands National Monument, we have prehistoric trackways. So this is truly an amazing place to live and have access to public lands.
And also, on top of that, in addition to the groups really utilizing the land and the different groups that we do, Visit Las Cruces, formerly our Convention and Visitors Bureau, has recognized we have this Monuments to Main Street month that happens in September. And this is the second year that we're working on this. And some of the things that we partner with the Friends group on is yoga in the monument, which will be happening every Saturday during the month of September, except the last Saturday. The reason why it's not going to happen the last Saturday is because it's also Public Lands Day, but we're going to have a mariachi concert in the monument that night. And so that's really bringing in really what our population is and just part of our cultural heritage to combine those two things. But the Convention and Visitors Bureau, or Visit Las Cruces, has recognized that Monuments to Main Street Month is one of their top 3 things that they're advertising throughout the rest of the country. When they go to trade shows, they talk about Monuments to Main Street Month. We do a plein air painting competition, and this is modeled after the one in Grand Staircase Escalante, which is a 2-week painting competition which brings people from all over the country into this little community of 800 people spending their money there. And so we have these opportunities to do this and bring in different groups that are kind of non-traditional that we would expect. And one of the last things that has been really just this wonderful opportunity is with the Girl Scouts. We have the first of its kind Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks Girl Scout Achievement Patch, which is now being modeled in California and is also starting to work in Maine at the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. So Las Cruces is leading the way in bringing together all these different communities and bringing together all these different viewpoints to show how valuable a monument is to a community and how it can impact it in a number of different ways.
Now, if the monument, happens to be reduced in size, do you see this impacting the community in any way economically?
I do. I think that, Chris is a perfect example without Oregon Mountain Outfitters. His business was inspired as a result of the monument. We have products. If it's not a monument, what are these businesses going to do with their products? They might have to rename them. They might choose to just discontinue those products. It's something, one of the things is that we have this monument and our local businesses really together make it makes Las Cruces a unique place as it is. That's one of the things that we can really, and I think we all brag about it in a lovely way that Las Cruces is our community and we're invested in it. And so when you start removing, first of all, you're ignoring their concerns and just the overwhelming support that we have for keeping the monument as is. So those voices are not being heard. But also you're disregarding any economic impact or movement forward by reducing that in size.
Now you talk about communities. I want to talk about right now moving into different demographic communities. Ben, when I spoke with you earlier, you mentioned that the Outfitters had an opportunity to reach a different community than you traditionally do. What other things that is your organization doing to continue to reach perhaps the next generation of people who may enjoy the monument?
Yeah, it's really important to us as a community to make sure that we're reaching out to our youth, because really they are the next generation of conservationists that we believe. So we have several events. One of them is we partner with Bureau of Land Management on this Public Ambassadors Program. We work with 14 girls that are in an underserved population that may not have opportunities to visit these places. And we spend a whole week with them out in the monument, showing them career opportunities with biologists, herpetologists, and other science kind of based career opportunities that they can see. We also, again, going back to our K through 12 program, we provide transportation grants. In the last year, so far this year, we've had over 1,000 kids get out and visit it. And we also work with our partners, Latino Outdoors, launching Nuestra Tierra. And so we work with our partner, Gabe Vasquez, and really highlighting the Hispanic, being majority Hispanic community, really engaging our Hispanic youth in the colonias and throughout our county to get out on these public lands and embrace it, because really for them it's about having fun. And having fun, they learn about what it means to care about the plants, the animals, and recreate in these places, and then those people will take that on in their future.
I see. Now, I mean, I want to talk a little bit more. We don't have too much time left before we move on to the questions. But you know, is that something that is one of those things when you talk about Latino Outdoors and partnering with them? Is that one of those things where you just were kind of like finally, you know, or trying to reach a different demographic that may not be familiar with public lands at all?
You know, these lands, we've seen tribes and pueblos. These are the historical ranges that they've been in. So it's so important that, you know, this isn't just about economics. It's great that we're having the story and that we're able to benefit as a community, but the protection of these resources is about the culture of our Hispanic heritage, as well as the tribe and pueblo heritage as well. So it's important that we have this conversation about economics, but it truly is about all of those different resources.
All right, now we want to move on to questions from the audience. We would like for you to state your name and and ask your question and who it's directed towards.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Teich, and I have a question regarding the borders of the monument as it is at the moment. I have a friend who's very concerned that there's always trucks coming in, pulling out the nice cacti and selling them probably to the greenhouses and stuff. Is there any plans for the future that would be prevented with more fencing or more personnel that would protect it?
So I'll talk a little bit about this idea of fencing and things like. So again, this national monument is managed by the Bureau of Land Management. It's not managed under what other people consider like the National Park Service. So again, it does have a multi-purpose mission. So we don't anticipate fencing. This is open spaces for people to range. So unfortunately, there are these activities that are occurring that the National Monument designation in and of itself protects those resources, but the enforcement of those is very challenging.
I mean, is this a personnel issue too?
I don't think it's a personnel issue. I think it's educating our community to make sure they're contacting the appropriate people when they see these types of activities occurring.
Oh, you mean is this like an illegal activity then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, in many places the removal of these cactus and things are illegal, yes.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Now we'll get to that in a second, but I want to ask you, how dealing with this whole transition, and there's a lot of things happening. The community's gearing up to obviously take advantage of a national monument, from what you guys have already shared with us and from what we've reported. How is that going with just the staffing that's available with the BLM and volunteers, and do people really know that there are some opportunities to get involved with it? Our
Bureau of Land Management has done a tremendous job staffing. They now have 4 park rangers that are there at prehistoric trackways and Organ Mountains Desert Peaks. They're there on weekends, they're leading hikes, they're engaging the community. So we've seen a tremendous job by our Bureau of Land Management providing resources to do that. We see new signs and things out there. We're seeing other types of infrastructure being done at Dripping Springs. So I think it's a tremendous job that they have done.
All right, we have another question. Hello.
I'm Shirley Miller, and my question really has to do with access. What is the difference in public access when the land is within the monument and BLM land, or outside the monument and BLM land?
You have a question or an answer for that, Ben?
Yeah, I can respond. So essentially, there hasn't been a reduction in access. These are the same places that sportsmen are going to utilize. They're also going to recreate, and ranchers are still able to continue to graze. The difference is that the monument designation protects those types of activities and prioritizes the objects, resources, and values above different types of uses, like extrication, oil and gas, mining, and things like that.
And I think you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I think one of the things that has happened, because it now has the designation of a monument, is that there is a lot more people trying to get out there. And I think there's a big misunderstanding that maybe you can educate the public on is now that it's a national monument, everything within it is public land, right? It's not. And many, many people do not understand that. And they do not understand that there is private property and that they are trespassing when they are on it. And how do we educate the public to honor the public or the private land that's within the monument?
Do you guys have any thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I would say, I acknowledge that, like, trespassing on private property and things, are a concern for any private individual. But the reality is those in-holdings were private before. They had similar, considerations. We are continuing to do education and outreach, and as we get through this resource management plan, another tool that helps provide an, the parameters of how we use the national monument, then some of those things will be kind of navigated.
Well, I mean, that was brought forth, that concern, in a similar concern. Ranchers, Congressman Pierce mentioned that he's spoken with the ranchers out there, and they're having, difficulty out there getting by because that, they feel that with the public land surrounding them, that it's kind of kept them from, expanding their operations or growing their businesses. How do you coordinate? How does the National Monument not stifle, possible economic growth for people that are already out there or want to, use their land as they want to?
Yeah. So to be clear, there are private in-holdings, but there's about 35 leases. Those leases have not changed. Again, I'm going to refer to this Congressional Research Service report that identifies that ranching was identified as one of the uses in the proclamation upon designation, and there's been no change in the 3 years since that designation time. So really, it's important to understand what is truth and the actual impacts to their businesses versus what is kind of the narrative.
All right, now we have another question.
Fred Martino from KRWG, usually not in this role over here asking a question, but I have one that actually I'd like both of you to talk about that goes even beyond the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, and you're both aware and talk about the importance of conservation overall. And I'm interested in this issue that, we have a limited water supply in our region, and the importance of conservation in the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, but overall throughout our region to protect land that otherwise might be developed and using a lot of our precious water that's very, very limited.
Well, I think it's we're looking at just this bigger picture of the desert and the history and the overall development and growth of the desert. It's kind of hard to think about drought right now just because we've had our monsoon season and just we're getting downpours on a regular basis. I do think we have to be, and when I use the term thoughtful stewards, I mean there are a number of different groups that are involved in this conversation. And when we talk about the BLM and their input plan, their business management plan, this is really where all of the different groups that are impacted by this need to be a part of that conversation. We need to talk about our concern for water. I mean, I don't think that, one of the reasons for protecting this as a national monument, and not just in Las Cruces, but throughout the western states, is so that there isn't a lot of development that is going to pull from these resources. The folks who are involved in this management and development of these places are considering those things and having to look at how they can best manage those areas, provide opportunities for people to enjoy and be able to be outdoors, but not have that impact to where it's pulling from our water resources. And so there are a number of people who are part of that conversation and experts as well.
I'm a little curious about that. The Albuquerque Journal recently reported a whole series with Lauren Villagran, who was recently with them, about how the Mesilla Bolson has seen a dramatic, drop in its aquifer from, the development in Juarez, and with the business owned by Carlos Slim's group. And that has alarmed some folks into thinking about that. I'm curious, why do you think your organizations are really talking about the conservation of water enough?
You know, I think that the conservation of water is really important, and our organization is not directly involved in those conversations too much. But I do think that what a national monument does is it helps create healthy habitats and watersheds can let the water sink into the aquifers, which is important. It also, again, it reduces the amount of development and stuff that we're going to see around our community, because ultimately, the more volume of people you have in a concentrated area, like we're seeing the report you mentioned in Juarez, we're seeing huge numbers of population density in one area, and so that's drawing from the resources that we do have.
All right, now we have another question.
Yes, I'm in this area primarily because of that hiking group you mentioned, seniors hiking group. What happens if the current president and Zinke manage to limit the size, if it goes back to the, say, 100,000 acres? What happens then? Because I think of national parks as being ours, not a government grab. It's giving it to us and not to private use. So what happens if it is reversed?
I'd like to start with, I think both of you can answer this question on how you feel or how your organizations are going to respond and if that should happen.
I think it's really an unknown. I think we would like to see, I don't think there is a plan about what happens after this. It currently is an attack on our national monuments. It's not just Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks, it's 27 other national monuments across the West. So this is truly, we've never seen anything like this from an administration that is reviewing these national monuments and with the potential to rescind or resize them. So we really don't know what the driving motivation is, and I think that's cause for alarm.
Now, I'm curious, what are your members saying, Carrie, that are involved with the Green Chamber of Commerce here in Las Cruces about the possibilities of this?
Well, the businesses certainly are concerned, because every single small business in town, I think, is safe to say that, it's hard to run a small business. It's hard to run a locally owned business when you have national chains that have marketing budgets and advertising budgets and that are usually located somewhere else, but that, we've got our local businesses that are based on whether or not they get a profit in a month and if they can advertise then and try and get more awareness about what they're doing. So any opportunity to help increase businesses to local businesses is going to be welcome. And so in general, our businesses are very supportive of the monument. You'll go around and you'll see businesses like the Truck Farm, like Sun Powered by Positive Energy, like Beck's. I know the Southwest Environmental Center. We support OMDP signs, and there's going to be some new signs that you'll see launching that have got some updated photos and that the Friends of the Organ Mountains are releasing. But I think, when we see businesses that are unveiling products that have the brochures in their place, that recognize the value, not just for conservation or preservation, but recognize the value that protected public lands have in our community. If they're thriving and they talk about it and they feel that it's important, that it's a good thing. And so to answer your question, I think for the most part that businesses do. And with the businesses that receive that marketing toolkit, we did a survey. 65% of those surveyed field questions about customers about OMDP. 32% of them use the national monument in their marketing and cross-branding. 20% of them have introduced new products. And so when we look at that, and that survey was conducted last year, when we look at that, it's why would we stifle that by removing that? And one other point, the thing that worries me about the removal of this designation, and that people don't understand, is that if it stops becoming public lands, it's going to become private land, which means that somebody can say, you're not welcome on my land at all. And so we have to really look at what happens with that. I mean, if you enjoy being able to see that, the thing that worries me the most is to see industrial development against the Organ Mountains, or to see an industrial plant out in the Desert Peaks where there are thousands of pictographs. I think that's disgusting to have that in our community.
Do you think supporters of the review, do you think that's what?
I don't think they're thinking about that. I don't think there's this long-term vision about what can actually happen if they stop becoming public lands.
Now, one of the things with public lands in the Antiquities Act, I'm a little curious, is do you think that this is going to prompt a great conversation about how the Antiquities Act really needs to be established and used?
I think they're having the conversation, but we've seen it tested before, and the use of the Antiquities Act has been used by 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats. since 1906. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation that has created places like Grand Canyon National Monument or Grand Canyon National Park and others. So the use of the Antiquities Act, I think, should not be on the table. You know, it is really there as an executive power. There's congressional has the power to do things like wilderness study areas and wilderness areas. So those are the right avenues, and we believe that the use of those is appropriate.
You know, there are environmental groups that say that the 1976 Federal Land Policy Management Act is supposed to restrict a president from you know, being able to take away land from the you know, already established monuments under the Antiquities Act. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that position?
You know, we believe that the power that the president has and the cases that have been brought forward in FLPMA, is what you're referring to, do provide that those protections should stay in existence.
I mean, there's also an argument that you know, this should be all handled in Congress. The Antiquities Act is a big federal land grab. We've heard people who support the review say things like that. Would it be easier if it was just in Congress, or do you think it should be left up to the president to decide on this?
We've had wilderness study area within our Diana County for nearly 30 years. There's been multiple bills for decades that have not been able to make a determination on those wilderness study areas. So Congress, you know, because there wasn't able to get a bill through to move on that, that's why the Antiquities Act is, because it represented our community's voice, the overwhelming support that we see from local citizens, tribes, Hispanic leaders, and others to utilize the Antiquities Act, because it, you know, this was something that our community asked for nearly 30 years.
You know, if you have an opportunity to speak to the Secretary of Interior, what are some of the things that you would like the Secretary of Interior to understand about the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument and what it means to this community?
You know, I'll just start by saying, one, he needs to understand that there's an immense amount of history and culture and biological resources that are there that our community embraces. Above that, these are the places that we go to recreate, that we go to have picnics with our family. We've, you know, celebrate matanzas and other birthdays and things like that. So it's really dear to us as New Mexicans, and so these are places that we love and care about. So, you know, I would tell them a story of what it means to me and my family, and what it means to our community as a whole.
Carrie?
And I would say, you know, I mean, in addition to those things, because that's, you know, when we're protecting our public lands and we think about national monuments, we do think about like how it, you know, how it affects us and how it impacts us. And I think of, for me, just being able to have access to be able to go out hiking, but also to our businesses that can make, you know, at least have an opportunity to thrive as a result of the national monument and be clever and show that they can create products for that and be, you know, and be creative in what they're doing for their marketing, because small businesses are having a hard time. So any way that they can be creative and invested in the community, because they already are, you know, to help them, I think is what we need to do. And so, you know, if I had the opportunity to speak to the Secretary of Interior, I would share with him the stories like Chris Lang's, like Beck's Coffee, Organ Mountain Outfitters, Southwest Expeditions, and talk about how our businesses have really embraced the monument. You know, there's another Salud de Mesilla. They're going to be introducing a dish. I keep looking for their mac and cheese, but they're like, that's the popular one. Let's try. So I keep pushing for that. But it really shows that there's like this community investment in our national monument as it stands. And I worry that if that monument size was changed or if that was removed, what damage it would do not only to our businesses, to our opportunity for tourism. You know, Lonely Planet recognized Las Cruces as one of the top 10 places to visit in 2016. Reader's Digest listed us as one of the top 16 secret places, although they used pictures from Arizona. So thanks to our Sun News, who's showing them what actually, we don't have saguaro cactuses in our national monument. But we're getting this national recognition that we never thought we would have. And it's really good recognition. For once, we're getting recognition that we're not at the bottom of the list for education and jobs. We're getting recognition as a place to visit.
Now we're creeping up on just a couple minutes left in the program, but I'd like to hear something from both of you on how do you have any thoughts or feelings on if the review has kind of taken some of your attention away from, you know, future things that you think that the community could be focusing on with the monument? Is there anything that has been perhaps placed on hold to focus on gathering support once again for a national monument?
We have an amazing community here, and I think that the monument is just one of the issues that is impacting our community. So it's one of several issues: immigration, border wall. These are all things that we care about living here in Doñana County. So I think that the people that are rallying behind this are aware of all these different aspects that are coming at us at once. And you know, it's impacting us as a community, but we're rallying together, supporting each other, and so the monument campaign is just, you know, one of those things.
You know, for the Las Cruces Green Chamber, I mean, we work very hard to support our local businesses in any way possible, and keeping money in our community, and so protecting our air, land, and water is one of those things. And so the monument is a natural fit. But you know, I think our community and our country as a whole has other things to work on than whether or not we need to remove designations of protected public lands. I do think it's an attack on, you know, I talk about when you attack one monument, you're attacking all of them. And when we talk about 27 monuments, this is really setting a bad precedent for what our priorities are in a community and for the country. And I think there are other things that we could really be working on instead of whatever some political agendas are.
All right, well, I want to thank you both for being here. Thank you so much for taking part in this forum. And also we want to thank you in the audience here in studio for your questions and for being here and taking time to be here as well. And we want to thank you for joining us for a special New Mexico Now. Remember, you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at KRWG for the latest news and programming announcements. And remember also that we would love to hear your story ideas and topics for this program and others. You can email us at feedback@nmsu.edu. Once again, thank you for joining us for a special New Mexico Now. I'm Anthony Moreno.